He ran the number 4 streetcar through downtown Toledo, Ohio, and grown women used to time their morning errands so they would catch his line. This was the summer of 1953. The man had an 8th grade education, a rented room over a hardware store, and one good suit he kept for funerals, and by every measure we usually use to size a man up, he had nothing at all. Yet the women rode his car on purpose, and businessmen who owned half of downtown would lean against the pole near the front just to hear what he thought about the ball game. He was not a handsome man, and he certainly was not a rich one. He could not have told you he was doing a single thing on purpose, but a room changed temperature when he stepped into it, and 40 years later I am still taking apart how a man with empty pockets became the most magnetic person most of us ever met. What that man had was charm, not the salesman kind that pushes at you, but the kind that lowers the wattage in a room so the other people in it can shine. It was a working code once, taught and copied on every shop floor and front porch in this country, and it was nearly all built on one thing being true. A man dealt with you in person, face to face, where his full attention either showed up or it did not. Then the telephone came. By 1960, it hung in roughly 4 out of 5 American kitchens, and a man could court a woman, settle his business, and pass a whole evening without ever once standing in front of another living soul. The face-to-face world that taught charm did not get banned. It just stopped being necessary, and a thing that stops being necessary stops getting handed down. 2 of these will tell you most of what you need to know. Number 28 is the one that made a stranger trust him inside a single conversation, and number 13 is the one a woman could feel across a room before he had said a single word. Hold on to both of those, because the last rule on the list turns out to be the engine hidden inside all the other 29, and I would rather you find that out down at the bottom than have me hand it to you up here at the top. None of these were tricks to get something out of people. They were 30 ways of making the person standing in front of you feel like the only one in the room. Here is the first. Number 30. He called on her in person. A young man in 1953 who wanted to court a girl did not send word ahead. He put on the good shirt, walked to her house, and shook her father's hand before he ever got near her. Standing in a strange front room making conversation with people who were sizing him up in real time was nerve-wracking, and that was exactly the point. A man who would walk to that door and stand at it had already told her something about himself that no message ever could. And when he could not be there, he wrote by hand. Number 29. A folded note, a few lines, left under a door or mailed for the price of a stamp. My grandfather courted my grandmother across 2 counties with a fountain pen, and she kept every letter he sent in a hat box until the day she died. You could not write a careless line and then call it back, so you sat with the words before you sent them. Then the telephone made the letter optional inside a decade, and optional things have a way of quietly going away. Number 28 is the one I promised would make a stranger trust him inside a single conversation. He gave you the whole of his attention. When you spoke, he turned his body toward you, set down whatever was in his hands, and looked at you like the rest of the route could wait. No part of him was somewhere else. You have felt the opposite 1,000 times, a man nodding along while his eyes hunt the room for somebody better to land on. Before the telephone taught us all to keep half an ear on a wire, that whole self-attention was simply how men stood in front of each other. Now it has gotten rare enough that a man who gives it to you is one you remember for years. Number 27. He caught your name on the first pass and used it back to you before you parted. Dale Carnegie wrote in 1936 that a person's own name is to him the sweetest sound in any language, and the men of that era had it worked out long before the book. That streetcar fellow knew every regular on his line by name, their wives, and half their children. He would say, "Good morning, Mr. Albrecht. How is that boy of yours getting on at Central?" And Mr. Albrecht rode the rest of the way downtown, standing a little taller in his coat. The next handful look like nothing, small mechanical courtesies, right up until you are the one they land on. Number 26. Walking a woman down the sidewalk, he put himself on the outside, between her and the street. Folks think that rule was about splashing puddles and runaway wagons, and 100 years back it was. By the 50s, it was a quiet signal that he always knew exactly where she was, that her safety had become his job, and that he would never once make a show of carrying it. Number 25. When a woman came to the table or rose to leave it, he stood. Not all the way to attention, just up out of the chair, half a second of effort that said the room rearranged itself a little around her coming and going. Try it now and watch how startled people get that a man would bother. Number 24. He lifted his hat to a woman on the street and took it clean off the second he stepped indoors. Now I will be honest with you, because half the hat business was pure fuss, and we knew it even at the time. The other half was real, though. It was a man briefly baring his own head, making himself a touch more exposed in front of you, and on any given day this town was full of small uncoverings like that between strangers who would never speak again. Number 23, and a tiny difference here was anything but tiny. He offered his arm rather than taking hers. Closing a hand around a woman's elbow to steer her is a man moving her where he has already decided to go. Offering the arm and then waiting lets her be the one who decides to take it. The same walk to the same car, and she felt every bit of the difference. Number 22. He opened the door, held it, and here's the part men skip now. He waited until she was settled before he went around to his own side. He did not swing it open, drop her in, and trot off around the front. He closed it gently once she was in. There is a whole ceremony in this next one that men do not even attempt anymore. Number 21. He walked her all the way to the door, and then he waited, not to be asked in. That was never the point of it. He stood on the step until she was inside, and the latch had turned, and in plenty of houses the porch light flicked off to tell him she was safely home before he turned back to the car. 2 minutes standing out in the cold, every single time, saying the evening was not finished until she was safe behind her own door. It told her more than 2 hours of talk ever could have. Number 20. He remembered what she had told him the last time, and he asked about it. She had mentioned her mother's hip was giving her trouble, and the next time he saw her the first thing out of his mouth was, "How is your mother getting on?" Think a second about what that told her. It told her that when the two of them were apart, she stayed somewhere in his mind, that he had not just been waiting through their last conversation for his own turn to talk. There is no flower a man can buy that says that. Let me stop the count for a moment. Think about the last time a stranger gave you his full, unhurried attention, not a clerk waiting for you to finish so the line could move, real attention. For a lot of men my age, the honest answer is that they cannot remember. You go to the doctor, and a girl young enough to be your granddaughter calls you by your first name off a clipboard and never once looks up from her screen. You start in on a story at a family dinner and watch half the table glance down at their phones before you reach the end of it. It is not that anybody means you the least bit of harm. It is that the thing that Streetcar Man did for every soul who rode his line, the plain act of being all the way there with another person, has gotten rare enough that a man can go a whole week without once receiving it and think nothing is wrong. We did not just lose some manners, we lost the daily experience of being seen. Number 19. When he paid a woman a compliment, he passed over the obvious thing and named the particular one. Tell a pretty girl that she is pretty, and she has heard it 100 times by Tuesday, and it lands on her like nothing at all. He would notice instead that she laughed with her whole face, or that she had been gentle with a nervous young waiter, and that is the thing he would say out loud. Number 18. He could dance, and the part that mattered was that he could lead without shoving. There was a way a man held a woman on a dance floor, a firm hand at the small of her back, a clear direction, but light enough that she could follow without ever being hauled around. It was a whole good marriage compressed into 3 minutes, a man being certain and gentle in the very same motion. By the time I was old enough for the Saturday dances, this was already going, the floor filling up with couples doing their own separate things a foot apart from each other, and something quiet went out of the evening that I do not think the young ones even knew to miss. I learned to lead from an uncle who had learned it himself back in 1940, and I am glad I got it from him while there was still a man around to get it from. Number 17. He brought her something small and exact, and never anything showy, not 24 roses meant to bowl a girl over. A single flower picked on the walk over, a worn paperback by a writer she had mentioned once, a little sack of the lemon drops she liked. You could watch a boy's whole character in the next one in about 2 seconds. Number 16. The handshake, firm and dry, one good pump, and he looked you square in the eye the entire time. That grip was a man taking your measure and handing you his own in the same 2 seconds before either of you had said a single word. A boy learned young that a limp hand and a wandering eye told a man everything, and never in your favor. Number 15, and this is one of the cleverest things those fellows did without ever once calling it clever. When you finished saying something to him, he would take your last few words and hand them right back to you as a question. You would say, "The foreman finally retired," and he would say, "Finally retired, after all those years." And before you knew what was happening, you were off, telling him the whole story, feeling for all the world like the most interesting man in the tavern. He had not offered a single opinion of his own. He had just held a door open and let you walk on through it. I have watched a man work an entire room this way, one person at a time, and every last person walked off certain they had just had a wonderful conversation. They had simply had it with themselves, and he was the one who quietly made the room for it. There is not a salesman alive today who would not pay good money to learn what those men did for free. Number 14. He asked a man about his work, and then he listened to the answer like it actually mattered, not the throwaway question you toss out while waiting for your own turn. He would ask a bricklayer how you keep a long wall from bowing in the August heat, then go quiet and take it in, and that bricklayer would stand there feeling, maybe for the first time all week, like the thing he knew was worth knowing. Every man alive is an expert in something nobody ever thinks to ask him about. Number 13 is the one I told you the women noticed before he ever opened his mouth. He could let a silence sit. Most of us are half terrified of a quiet moment and rush in to fill it with noise, and the noise is nearly always about ourselves. He could sit with you in a comfortable quiet and never need to break it, and a woman across a porch swing could feel that in her bones. It told her he was not nervous, not performing, not desperate for her to think well of him. When I was courting in the early 70s, I learned this one the hard way. I talked. Lord, how I talked, filling every silence like it was a leak in a rowboat, and I watched the girl I was sweet on drift slowly toward a quieter fellow who simply sat beside her and let the evening be whatever it was going to be. He was not one bit smarter than me. He just was not afraid of the quiet. It took me years to understand exactly what I had stood there and watched happen. Number 12. He remembered your wife's name and your children's names and asked after them by name. A man would come into the barber shop, and that streetcar fellow, in for a trim himself, would say, "How is Eleanor feeling? Did the baby's fever finally break?" And the man's whole face would change. You cannot fake that with a system or a trick. You only remember the names of people you are genuinely paying attention to, which carries us right up close to the thing this whole list is secretly about. But I am getting ahead of myself. By 1960, the telephone had finished its long march into the American home and become something close to universal. Here is what that machine actually did. Before the phone, courtship was a physical performance with an audience. A young man who wanted to see a girl walked to her house, sat in her parlor, made conversation with her mother, and earned every inch of ground in person in front of people who were quietly grading him the whole time. The same was true of nearly everything else a man did. You settled a debt face to face. You carried news to a man's door. You apologized standing on his porch with your hat in your hands. The telephone took all of that and let it happen down a wire at a distance with your shoes off in your own front room. It was a wonderful machine, and I would not hand mine back. But the face-to-face arts, the reading of a room, the handling of a hard conversation in person, The charm that only exists when two people are actually standing in front of one another, those went from daily necessities to optional skills almost overnight, and a man simply stopped being graded on them. If any of this is landing the way I suspect it is, subscribe and stay with me a while. I put one of these together every week, and there are not many places left where these things still get said out loud. I would rather say them to a few men who remember than to nobody at all. Number 11, he let a man finish his sentence all the way to the end of it, even when he already knew where it was headed, even when he flat disagreed. There is a kind of man who is only ever waiting for his turn, leaning in, ready to pounce the second you draw a breath, and every one of us has walked away from a talk with him feeling run clean over. He gave you the whole length of your own thought instead. Number 10, he could take a joke at his own expense without his face so much as flickering. The men needled him, because that is how men tell you they have decided to like you, and he laughed first and hardest at himself. A fellow who can be teased and not bristle tells a whole room he is easy in his own skin. The ones who puffed up and got sore, everybody learned to step quietly around. Nobody steps around an easy man. They gather to him. Number 9, and this is the rarest one on the whole list, then or now. He praised a man when that man was nowhere in the room to hear it. Any of us can flatter a fellow to his face and run him down the moment he is out the door. He did the reverse of that. You would hear, second-hand and weeks later, that he had said something good about you to somebody who mattered, at a moment when he had nothing at all to gain by it and figured you would never even know. Except it always gets back to a man, and a good word that reaches you that way is worth 10 of them said to your face. Number 8, he could say the plain, true, slightly awkward thing instead of the smooth one. And here is where I owe you a little honesty, because I have been talking about charm like all of it was good, and it was not. A great deal of charm was armor. Some of the smoothest men I ever knew, men who could warm up a whole room of strangers inside 5 minutes, could not say one true thing to the people who actually loved them. My own father was like that. He could charm a stranger on a train and have him laughing in a minute, and he went to his grave having never once told me to my face that he was proud of me. The charm was real, and the distance underneath the charm was every bit as real. So when I tell you the best of these men could set the polish down and say the hard, plain, loving thing right out loud, understand that was the rarest charm of all. It is the one I would trade every other rule on this list to have gotten from him. Number 7, when something went right, he handed the credit straight to somebody else. The foreman would praise the crew for finishing a job a day early, and he would say it was Petey who caught the bad weld, when half of us standing there knew good and well he had caught it himself. Number 6, he could keep his mouth shut, tell that man something in confidence, and it died with him. In a town where gossip was the main entertainment going, a man you could actually trust with a hard thing was rare enough that fellows would drive out of their way just to bring him their troubles. He never repeated them, and he never used them. You have no idea how much a man like that quietly carries for a whole town for years on end until the day he is gone, and every one of those held things goes into the ground along with him. Here is where the list stops being about manners and starts being about the man underneath them. Number 5, he remembered your losses. He knew when the anniversary of your boy had come around, and he made no production of it, just set a hand on your shoulder by the lockers and said, "I was thinking about Danny today," then moved off before you ever had to find the words. Most men steer hard around another man's grief because standing in it is uncomfortable. He steered gently toward it for that 1 second, set the hand there, and then let you be. Number 4, he was the same man to the busboy that he was to the bank president. You can learn nearly everything worth knowing about a fellow by watching how he treats the people who can do absolutely nothing for him. He called the kids sweeping the platform by his first name and asked how the schoolwork was coming, the same easy way he spoke to the men who rode downtown every morning in good coats. He kept one face for everybody, high and low alike, and every man watching clocked it. Number 3, he showed up. A man on the line who was out sick would find him at the door come evening with a pot his landlady had cooked. No announcement, no fuss made over it. Somebody moving house would find his shoulder at the heavy end of the couch before he had been asked twice. Charm in a warm parlor is one thing. Charm that pulls its coat on and drives clear across town in the cold to sit a while with you is the real article, and the men always knew which one of those they were looking at. Anybody can be delightful at a party. He was delightful at a funeral, by which I mean only that he was there. Number 2, and this is the one even those men rarely had any word for. He stayed when it got uncomfortable. When a man broke down, or there was bad news sitting heavy in a kitchen, and every instinct a person has was telling him to mumble something kind and get himself out the door, he stayed. He did not try to fix it, and he did not fill the air with the things people say so that they are allowed to leave. He pulled a chair up and he sat down in it, sometimes for hours, mostly quiet, and his staying said the one thing the grieving man most needed to hear, which was, "You are not alone in this, and I am not going anywhere." I have been on the receiving end of that exactly twice in my whole life, and I remember both of those men's faces better than I remember my own wedding day. That is what this kind of presence buys a man, not a favor that comes back around someday. It buys him a place where, for as long as he draws breath, he is never once forgotten. Number 1, he was genuinely interested in you. That is the whole of it. No technique. He never learned it out of any book. Every other rule on this list, the hat and the handshake and the name and the held silence, every single one of them was only ever a way of doing this one back when a man did not yet have the words for it. You can fake all the rest for an evening if you have to. You cannot fake this one, and people can always tell the difference. That streetcar man was not performing interest in the people who wrote his line. He honestly wanted to know how Mr. Albrecht's boy was getting on at Central. That is the reason it worked. That is the only reason it ever worked, for any of them. These men are nearly all gone now, and the few still here would wave a list like this one away with the back of a hand. Charm, they would tell you, was just how you treated people, and a man did not expect a medal for it. That is the strangest part of what we lost. It did not go in a war or a law or a single bad year. It slipped out the side door a little at a time, and nobody thought to write any of it down, because who on earth writes down how to be a person? So now it has to be chosen on purpose, which is a harder thing than simply inheriting it, but it is not a complicated thing. The man in front of you tomorrow, the young clerk, your own son, the woman pouring your coffee, is waiting to be looked at like he matters, the same way that streetcar man looked at every soul who climbed aboard his car. You already know how to do it. You have just been told for 50 years that it is old-fashioned and does not count for much. It counts for nearly everything. It always did. Go and be the one who remembers that.